they're all insane.
But these things depress me.
Ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Hidden Perspective. This is Rob Greco, joined by Jules, spotting a new hat. I've never seen Jules wear a hat in the time that I've known him. You're looking very schmick, Jules.
I'm practicing some new looks, Rob. I've got to diversify. As my hair slowly wanes. So, I'm just exploring it. I'm like, yeah, fuck it. I'll try a cap, So,
you're rocking it. Yeah. If I imagined you to wear a hat, I think you would have looked much worse in my imagination than you do in real life. So
that's good.
So it's a positive sign.
I think. Yeah.
No, you look good. I'm sure lots of people in Melbourne rock similar types of hats. It's a big thing these days.
Wearing cool hats, yeah. It's a bit
cool hats.
It's a bit more like probably a little bit more like hip hop than I am,
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I haven't bought any clothes in like 5 years.
This just bought a hat.
This was given to me.
The representation of my fashion consumption in the last 5 years.
A hat, yeah. A hat and some Birkenstocks.
What brand is that? Is that some edgy brand that people like to wear?
It's not. Well, it's Saint Ali merchandise, actually. So I didn't buy this hat. It was.
They actually do have some good merch. They have a cafe at the airport, and that cafe at the airport sells a ton of merch.
Yeah,
and it's actually not terrible Melbourne merch. You know how you're walking in the airport and you see like these Melbourne merch that doesn't have anything to do with Melbourne. And then all of a sudden, a coffee store decided to offer merch that's actually like somewhat trendy, and it's good.
Yeah, no, Sal like at one point had all these designers like proper full on was going to really try and escalate it and turn it into like a full on fashion label and stuff. So yeah, no, their merch is good. I'll more than proud to wear some Saint Ali merch.
That's great. When did he actually start? Like, how long ago when did he first start? Like, did he start with a cafe? Did he start with coffee beans? Like, what's his story?
Salvatore Malatesta. Sal was at Melbourne Uni. He was like 18 or 19 doing his law degree, which you could do as an undergraduate. And he was sick of eating the crappy cafeteria food, and there wasn't a single proper like espresso machine on campus. So he started up decent hospo at Melbourne Uni, which exploded. And by the time he finished his law degree, he had like I think just under 20 different venues.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then he was a lawyer for like, I don't know, it's like a grad lawyer for like 6 months, and then got told off because he had his own espresso machine in his office.
It's the most Italian thing to do at a commercial law firm. Just bring your own espresso machine. Good blob.
But yeah, so he sold most of the uni venues. I think he still owns one. I think he owns the one big venue at Monash.
Yeah.
But he ended up selling all the uni venues, and then I think he retired at like, I don't know, 26 or something.
Wow.
And then got real bored, and then bought Saint Ali when I was only a couple of years old, and then turned it into a coffee empire. He's trading crypto at the moment and making a lot of money. It's pissing me off because he sent me a text. He gave me a crypto tip like 3 days ago, and then the stock just went bang and went up to like 40%, and I was like, oh. So I didn't want to buy it first thing Monday. But I don't know anything about crypto. Do you own any crypto, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I started buying some crypto a few years ago when they had the big like 2017 boom, and kind of caught that at the very tail end. So it dropped a fuck ton in value as soon as I bought it. But now, which is classic. But now it's gone up. It's gone up a lot. I didn't invest too heavily in it. Hey listeners, Rob here. I had some technical difficulties with this episode, to say the least, so this episode is going to jump right over to where Jules and I chat about the substance of the episode, which is that a lot of art is being viewed as problematic without having regard to anything else. So it's going to cut right over to that part where we are chatting about that topic. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for putting up with the editing of the episode.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, and also, why is there now this expectation on narrative art that narrative art needs to like inherently satisfy the ethical needs of society? It's like if a story doesn't, if a narrative can't functionally punish like a wrongdoer in a movie, then that movie implicitly supports, because it's like you have no idea what art is for or used by, man. It's driving me mad, bro. And so like, and so, but again, it's like not only have we become myopic to the way in which art is being consumed and discussed in media, in that it's exclusively around its morality, but there's also this perverse expectation on art to, serve us like the Bible does in constructing clear, moral behaviors, consequences, and all the rest of it. And it's like, fuck off. Sometimes like if the art, if the consequences of a narrative, which might be the evil racist rapist gets away with all of his crimes, makes you feel unbelievably agitated, aggravated, annoyed, that may well have been the artist's intention. And in evoking that response from you, you're considering the ethical consequences there. It isn't being presented as some sort of ethical binary where it's like bad people are always appropriately punished and good people are always appropriately rewarded, because if the art was always like that, you'd never be surprised, you wouldn't actually be engaged, and it also wouldn't be a fair representation of real life, because real life doesn't mirror our best wished ethical frameworks. Like it fucking doesn't match very well at all to those things.
Yeah.
So
that was good. Yeah, that's my real beef with all the cancellations of Dr. Seuss and anything that could be perceived as racist, which is the presupposition that it has to be pure. Like maybe they did perceive that as non-problematic back 100 years ago, back 50 years ago, and that's fine. But the fact that you can't have it now is only because it's not 100% pure, when you could just totally say, you could look at it and you could say, oh, that book's pretty racist in XY respects, but all these other things that it tried to do, it's like everything isn't about the issue that you are fundamentally concerned about. Dr. Seuss came up with all these rhymes that resonated with so many people, and like stories like were so fun to tell your kids, gave kids a sense of wonder and a sense of, respect for literature. All that is devalued as zero only because it can in part be perceived as, portraying certain characters in a way that's racist. It's completely devaluing of art. And like the idea that, if you want to create art in this day and age, you are therefore committing yourself to having that art rendered null and void in 20 years' time when the cultural mores inevitably change, right? How can any art today be respected when you've invited this test that is, it has to be suitable for the moral standards of today, and it also has to be suitable for the moral standards of, 30 years into the future? It's a terrible way to approach art. Do we want nothing to be produced? Do we want nothing to challenge us? And the idea that we have to be perfect, which is bullshit, because none of you are perfect. I don't care if you write for whichever cultural magazine that you think gives you some moral prestige or some brownie points. You're not perfect. I bet I could, look into your, the skeletons in your closet, and there'd be a few fucking dark and sinister things that need to be sorted out. Like, how dare you project some moral purity and, export that onto everyone else?
Mm-hmm. I agree, and I think the like I'd kind of where things are even more perverse for me, right? Like, I mean, if you're talking about, for example, with the Dr. Seuss thing, right? I mean, we're going to presume that it's kids who read these books, right? If you you can intuitively, it seems well-founded to exclude children from hyper-violent content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the same could be said of hypersexual content,
right?
So and then potentially then you can make the argument, well, if something's racist, and racism tends to, our conception of what racism is sort of morphs over time, and so what was in the same way that something hypersexual would have been, or in the same way something hyperviolent would have been. So, so excluding children from these Dr. Seuss things because they've been classified racist or whatever, I'd be willing to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a way bigger issue. I think there's a way bigger issue with what's happening with art, which is that you make a movie for adults, right? Say dealing with some difficult subject matter, uncomfortable, difficult subject matter.
Right.
Let's say a child molester or whatever, or a rapist, or someone who's racist, or whatever the narrative might be.
Mm-hmm.
There is now this growing expectation in the community that it is unacceptable for there not to be explicit morality imposed on the narrative. So that is to say that if racists get away with racism in movies and television, if rapists get away with raping, and if like in the Shakespearean frameworks, those that commit sins, God brings wrath upon, and if justice isn't served, and if you don't leave the movie feeling, oh good, I'm so glad that piece of shit got undone in the end, then the movie is can be accused of being deliberately ambiguous in its condemnation of certain behaviors.
Yeah.
So that is to say, if I'm Quentin Tarantino and I shot some brutal rape scene and then just had that rapist just leave and then show him in the rest of the movie having a great time or whatever else, I've effectively said, rape's okay or whatever. Or I haven't used the movie as an opportunity to condemn his action.
Yeah.
And it's like, Rob, people, unfortunately, what's happening in this woke, enlightened universe is that people conflate being made to feel a certain way, which is normally discomfort, disgust, anger, injustice towards characters or plots, as somehow the artist's supporting of what people are feeling uncomfortable about. I think so much of the time people don't realize when they're consuming art that's dealing with problematic areas, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's racism, classism, I don't know, whatever's freaking people out.
Yeah.
What I would say to you is this burning sensation of wishing for greater justice in the world, isn't that a political statement? Like, if I was to say, I'm going to create a piece of art that makes people leaving wishing for the world to be different.
Yeah.
Haven't I succeeded as an artist? And actually, not even, and it's further than, I started a discussion or whatever. You can start a discussion by fucking, doing anything. I take a shit on someone's car, I can start a discussion.
Yeah.
It's not, starting a discussion's totally overrated as compared to inciting a genuine emotional response, right? An emotional and then which triggers like significant, intellectual inquiry, whatever it is. But I feel like too many people speak to me about how movies and narrative plots or whatever frustrated them because X, Y, and Z wasn't appropriately punished, or the movie didn't balance these aspects of morality. And it's like, if you watch a movie about a student-teacher relationship that goes into the nuances of that relationship and makes you feel really uncomfortable about it, and then maybe after you leave, the movie almost presented itself as, is this really a problem? Isn't it a problem? And because you spent so much time watching the movie, you could say that movie was gross. It was inherently pedophilic because it was so much of the time presenting a child-adult sexual relationship as fine and non-damaging and not awful and all the rest of it. And it was making me feel disgusting and gross. And, there wasn't enough about how bad this thing is. And it's like, well, maybe that was trying to do that to you, was trying to agitate you,
Yeah.
So through the harmlessness of it obviously being all make believe, right, and people acting. So I think it's one thing to be like, oh, this is racist content, and we don't want young children consuming backdated racial stereotypes that have negative connotations.
Whatever, yeah.
I'm so much more okay to that than an MA 15 plus or an R-rated movie shown at important art houses and movie film festivals being cancelled because the subject matter was difficult, which I think is just becoming more and more of a thing.
I really want to get to the bottom of the instinct that drives all of this. Like, tell me how that instinct to have movies be perfectly pure and close a loop in the way you want and, dish out the punishment in the way that you think's appropriate is any different from, mothers in the 90s all petitioning the government to ban video games for being too violent. Or how is it different from, I remember when we were in high school and that big Ben Cousins doco came out, and the criticism of, I think it was Channel 7, which made the doco, is that they published the doco on 2 nights. So they left at the end of the first half of the documentary, which was the first viewing session. It was left with this. The final scene was Ben Cousins in a 5-day bender, living life with all his friends, and the criticism the whole week was that how dare Channel 7 not close that loop and showing why drug use is bad, drug use is negative, our kids should never do drugs. And it's just, if you had just waited an extra week, you would have seen how fucked up Ben Cousins was. But putting that aside, if there even is a narrative that you don't like, or a narrative that doesn't close you fully, it's just one director in the world. It's just one person presenting their idea.
But Rob, it's more silly than that, because the person wants to watch a piece of, so that what like the criticism that you just gave is that this didn't tell people that drugs are bad enough, right?
Yeah.
So they've watched it and then they're talking about the fact that drugs aren't bad enough. It's like, what are you talking about? You just consumed the content and then are talking about and it's giving you the exact feeling.
It's already raised
It's already raised
discussion.
it in you.
Yeah.
It's already raised it in you. You're already talking about it. You're already going, but drugs are awful. And it's like everyone who knows anything about Ben Cousins at that time knew his whole entire football life and had been destroyed. It wasn't like it was some sort of like it wasn't well known. So this. And so, what's the driving instinct? I think the driving instinct is people not understanding that agitation is this incredible aspect of art, and that sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it isn't intentional, but
I think you could also make the case even stronger, and not that, even if it doesn't raise the discussion, like a video game, it rewards you for killing more people.
Yep.
Like, there actually isn't even a discussion that shooting is bad at the end of the video game. If anything, you think shooting is fun. Would you say that we should censor video games from our kids? And this is directed at kids, which is even more susceptible because they're vulnerable. And so this is actually an even tougher case to defend, which is that it doesn't raise the discussion of why killing is bad. It rewards it. Kids it's associated with fun, and it's targeted to kids who are vulnerable and impressionable. And I still don't give a fuck, because the responsibility for moral behavior in society falls on each and every one of us. And if you see something there, if you see trends, if you see behavior, if you see content or a product or something that you don't like, it's this idea that I get to decide how everyone else is raised. I get to decide exactly what everyone else is exposed to. And I think that instinct, that you could call it authoritarian, you could call it whatever other word you want to assign to it, it's the instinct that what I feel is morally superior to everyone else, and therefore I get to decide what everyone else is exposed to.
But those games, half of them are rated like M, MA.
Right.
I don't know, Grand Theft Auto is supposed to be R, isn't it? I mean, but it was all a piss take, and we all obviously played it at 10 years old. Yeah. I mean, you're doing decrepit things, you literally, I mean, I must have been in year, I reckon San Andreas was probably year 5,
Yeah.
So, and I mean, it's awful to say. But,
it's awful. But, and I would also say, to support my, what I was saying previously, is it was a huge debate in society. I'm pretty sure John Howard did ban it for a while. I'm pretty sure there was
San Andreas had some problems. Yeah.
There was some bans. So the censors, quote unquote, won the debate for a small time. But what it did do is it raised really interesting intellectual discussion. There was a big field of academia which actually looked at it and said, okay, maybe we do want to know, are our kids going to all turn out to be mass murderers after playing violent video games? And the evidence came back time and time again saying that there's no causal link between what you play or what you consume. So in other words, the art you consume doesn't dictate your behavior. And I think that's, I don't know how well that extrapolates out to other issues. If I watch content that is racist, or if I watch content that is this social ill or this social ill, will I become that? Will I perpetuate that? And at least in the context of video games, a whole field of academia decided that there's no causal link. And a lot of those social justice, proponents and people who say, art should be perfectly pure, they would probably be on the side of people should be able to play video games. They were on the side of that cultural libertarianism back in the 90s and back in the 2000s, because, it was maybe cooler to be, in favor of, standing against censorship back then. But I don't understand why, if they could believe that only a few decades ago, they've switched wholeheartedly on the favor of, trying to ban that content.
Yeah. I mean, it is, when you say it out loud, so, all of us in our Grand Theft Auto lives probably did some disgusting things. It's interesting. That's appalling, right? Intuitively, do you want your 10-year-old kid doing that?
I'm pretty sure my mum banned the game from my brother and I for 2 years. She took it away from us. She saw what we were up to. She's my mum. I was a 10-year-old kid. She gets to decide what I'm playing with.
Okay, so you were, well, maybe, yeah. See, my parents were too busy trying to kill each other. I get to do whatever I wanted, which turned out great.
Yeah, killing it.
I wonder whether that is the best thing for, like, how old are we in year 5? Like 10?
Yeah.
Something like that? A bit older.
Yeah.
It's probably not the best thing. But, like, I've managed to not do anything awful like that to anyone. But, look, it is interesting because you also have this idea, of course, of this unconscious bias, cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
And I do think probably part of the reason why, the academics, when they looked at, and the psychologists or whatever, when they looked at the influence of video games and this art on behavior, I think and it not having an effect, I think it's because all of the other cultural infrastructure, which is probably so much more significant and would be generally ubiquitous, allows that to be a moment of surrealism, right?
It overrides it. Yeah.
Yeah, it overrides it, right? So, like, obviously, even as a 10-year-old or whatever, 12-year-old, whatever, and I've got this immeasurable plasticity that's happening in my brain 24/7.
Yeah.
Images of women in dresses and boys in shorts is everywhere, right? So, and to that extent, particularly as a younger kid, images of girls and flowers and prettiness and these kinds of things, I totally buy all that social conditioning stuff. Your mum's in makeup, your dad's in a suit. Tradies are there, and then if we existed in a world where there wasn't this uniform level of cultural expectation seated in our brains, then I think we would come out different. So I do believe in this cultural conditioning thing, and to that extent, if art, it's like, what role does art play in creating those conditions for us, right? And I think this is how people are able to argue for cancelling of certain content, because of how it feeds into this overall culture, right? But in the case of playing Grand Theft Auto and killing sex workers and chopping people's heads off and doing outrageous things like that, massacres, right? I can't think of many games that you can just go on some genuine machine gun massacre. That's such a moment of surrealism, and I just don't think it does anything to penetrate your actual.
Doesn't compute. Yeah, it doesn't.
Doesn't compute. So
yeah, you brought it up in the context that you were really disappointed that even if there's a grain of truth to all of this stuff, the cultural conditioning, maybe directors and people producing art need to be more responsible. What was it that was so frustrating about that?
Yeah, so I've got this review here. It's for a new TV series, like Hulu, developed for FX and Hulu. So the TV series is called A Teacher. The review is in The Age. It's by Carl Quinn, who's like an art journalist.
Yeah.
Culture, TV, radio. Now, it starts with 3 stars, okay? So it's a review. It's a review of this piece of art. The headline is Sex Scandal Drama, A Teacher Makes a Mess of Its Lesson in Morality. Okay? And straight away in that headline, it's lesson in morality. It's not a parable from the fucking Bible. It's a 10-part teacher-student TV show, and let's be honest, a lot of young boys are going to be very excited to watch this, is the point. Anyway, so makes a mess of its lesson in morality. I feel like saying you should look at what 12-year-olds are watching on Pornhub and check the lesson in morality there. Anyway, but the thing is, right? It's given oh mate, it's outrageous. It's like I'm too yeah, I need to anyway, we won't talk about my sex life. Basically I feel like I'd be a prude with these youngins, mate. It's fucking like, all right. So it's been Hannah Fadil has been living with the thorny subject matter of a teacher for a long time. Was she going to make the movie? Ethical and moral minefields of the story. Blah, 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 blah. More on the narrative. Soon added the going like rabbits. Exactly right. This is, which is the reason why people are going to watch this. Anyway, not a single word of this article is about the acting, the directing, the quality of the narrative, its excitement, its pacing, soundtrack, sound editing, set, realism. It's entirely a discussion outside of the 3 stars about how it's problematic in the way it resolves this narrative around teacher and student, And quite specifically, I'll read this. But there's some serious dodging here. By making Claire new at school, it sidesteps the issue of grooming, right? By having Eric turn 18 soon after their relationship begins, it evades the charge of statutory rape. The age of consent in Texas is 17. By having the teacher be female, as in maybe 1/10 of such real-world cases, and the student male, it replaces shame and silence with bragging rights, at least initially, when the truth comes out. And by casting the tiny Mara, who is 37, opposite the bulky Robinson, who is 25, it avoids the terrible optics. So it didn't deal with grooming. It didn't deal with statutory rape. It had a female abusing a male as opposed to the inverse. And it casted people who didn't actually look that different in age to each other. Why does it have to do these things? Like, why? This isn't this hasn't been designed to be like, it's not going to be shown to every teacher to get their teacher's registration going, this is what, this is what sexual abuse at schools is. And this is, it's like, no, this is some fucking 3-star Foxtel thing that a bunch of young boys are going to be wanking to in the middle of the night, really excited to watch. Like that, chill the fuck out. And also, on what basis was this film given 3 stars? Like you read this review and it's just, I'll read the last paragraph.
If you're honest to your critique, you would have given it 1 star, half a star, right? You said nothing favorable about it.
Yeah, so
why does it even deserve 3 stars?
Why does it have? On what basis is it given 3 stars? Like, I don't understand. But again, why is some fucking dude who writes articles about Ed Sheeran concerts giving us some fucking ethics lesson on the complexities of this topic? Is he some fucking expert on child-student relationships and power imbalances? No, bro. You're supposed to be an expert on directing, acting, screenplay, right? Like, why are you talking as if you're an ethicist?
Yeah.
You're not, mate. You're the culture TV and radio editor for The Age, Your job's to make mainstream art look good, and it used to be, and then make edgy art look more exciting than it actually is, because most of this cool art at the fancy film festivals makes people bored as to bat shit. But now it's just like, anyway, it's like,
I don't think it always, go on.
Last thing I'll say on this, why are art editors portraying themselves as ethicists, and why is art almost exclusively now in articles I read across all different kinds of papers so rarely ever addressing the issues of the art that don't pertain to representation or the culture wars? It's as if acting doesn't matter. It's as if the quality of the narrative doesn't matter. In this case, it was all of these aspects of the narrative that meant it didn't address the true complexity and true reality of, teacher abuse at schools. I just don't.
It's almost as like it is disturbing, but it's almost as like the director was actually on your side. He didn't want to deal with those issues because he probably didn't know how to do it properly. He's leaving it for someone else. He's leaving it for someone who can do a better job. Isn't that what you want? It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you do tackle it, you're not going to do it properly because you're not going to dedicate the whole film to it. If you don't tackle it because you can't do it justice, well, then you didn't tackle it. So you can't do anything right in the eyes of these people unless you have a perfectly pro-social justice, pro-woke movie that's some perfect director that's out there. And maybe that person does exist. I don't know. I haven't seen that movie yet. But it reminds me of the movie Soul. Have you seen it? It's a new Pixar film.
Yes.
Did you enjoy that film?
Yes.
Fantastic film.
Yes.
I thought it was great.
Film. Why? What's the problem with
it? It had a black lead.
Yep.
It's a black jazz musician in New York, and he dies. Yep. And there's a discussion about afterlife and souls and purpose in life and pursuing, your dream and not, succumbing to the rat race. Essentially an all-black cast. Many of the characters were black. It was about him, his mum, his mum's friends, a cat that he encountered. The problem was, according to this critic, was that it killed a black person early in the movie.
Yeah.
And if you watch the movie, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Because he needs to die to set up the whole soul thing.
So again, it's a catch-22. If you don't have a black lead, it's terrible. If you do have a black lead, you'll criticize anything that is wrong with the storyline and impugn that on racism. You can't do anything right.
Not if someone needs to be able to grab some baity headline. Yeah. Like if someone's
exactly. So it's
right, which is what that sounds like
at the end of the day.
Right? It is about incentives, but surely I can't be the only person pulling their hair out. The fact that across mainstream art reviews, whether it's music, movies, television, fucking everything, is framed in this discussion almost exclusively. Like, that is unbelievable. To me, it's the equivalent of, reading a review of a football game and only talking exclusively about, one particular incident in the game that doesn't necessarily have to do with football. So it might be, say, for example,
always talk about the umpires.
Yeah, the umpiring. Sweet. Like the umpires. It's like, yeah, but mate, the umpires. Yeah, but they made the umpires. Like, what? Someone kicked a goal here. Someone did this.
Yeah.
They like the fullback went
that
to
coach
went
made
to
that
full
decision.
Forward, made his decision. Yeah. This. Oh no. What we want to talk about is, like,
these people
fuck
fucking infuriate me. They're the worst people to listen to in AFL commentary.
How can you not, like? Oh man, it's just art. So. I'm hoping to release more music and a wider art. And if someone whose job it was to be informed on the makings of art and how art's made and all the rest of it was to just go and write up and talk about the way that they think the narrative should have been constructed exclusively when they give me their fucking shitty 3-star review, I would be seriously pissed off,
At the end of the day, we're assigning a lot of weight to, a small group of society that I think is largely set up by incentives. And, there would be a part of these people that does genuinely agree with it. But a key barometer for me, time and time again, I don't know if you've ever done this or you've noticed it, is going on Rotten Tomatoes and seeing the variance between the audience score and the critic score. Often, when you watch a movie that you'll love, the audience score will be extremely high and the critic score will be extremely low. And that, to me, is, a discrepancy that says it all.
Yeah. Well, it's like I would have thought that the reason why that happens is because the sort of, mainstream people just want some pleasing, entertaining piece of content. Whereas art critics really care about quality of the acting and the realism and the subtlety. Yeah. And then when they write a review, they don't have a fucking word to say about it. So so is the disconnect there because people have different expectations around art and the detail in which they look for it? It'd be like saying if I got most people to listen to Wagner for an hour, most people want to be pulling their hair out, right? Whereas if you play Wagner to a bunch of classically trained musicians, they're going to tell you it's some of the greatest music ever made. Now that disconnect happens because one or particular audience is really well informed and studied and versed in that music, so they're able to participate in the subtleties. That's what I would have thought would be the explanation for why critics and mainstream audiences disperse.
I think that's overly generous, because I would say that
Clearly.
people who give audience scores in Rotten Tomatoes, they actually know a lot about film. It's probably like someone like you. I remember you didn't go to school, and when you weren't at school, you were watching movies, so you know a lot about movies. You would be an audience member giving the score in Rotten Tomatoes, and I would say you would know a lot about movies. You're not an expert, but I would think a lot of the people who are commenting on the audience score in Rotten Tomatoes actually aren't some fucking racist hillbilly in the south of America. They're probably a pretty, educated, intelligent people who knows a lot about movies. And I think what you're actually seeing is a dichotomy in the critics, people who are paid to do this for a living, whether it's because of incentives, they need to take some certain line, or whether it is for social pressure because they write something, and if it's not perfectly in line with the social justice consensus or whatever it is, they'll get vilified and they might lose their job. So there's an incentive structure to push them towards these insane worldviews that art can only be done in a really hyper woke way that is 0% problematic and 100% amazing, that they end up writing these really lofty reviews that don't actually address the underlying art which they're paid to review.
Yeah, it's like, it would be, what it reminds me of? When you're at school and you're given an essay topic, that's what these articles remind me of, and they're all the same essay topic. So it's like in the case of the article I just spoke about, the essay topic might be the teacher. Let's I can't remember what the teacher's name is in this stupid TV show. I don't know, Sarah. The essay topic might be, Sarah is portrayed as a victim, not a perpetrator.
Right.
Discuss.
Please discuss.
Right. Yeah.
how did this movie deal with the true realities of sexual abuse by teachers at schools? Discuss. Bro, this is a movie review. It's a 3 stars. What happens in the movie? Is it good? Why am I reading your ethics discussion on this movie?
Yeah.
What the fuck is this? And why has this just become MO for all culture reviews? It's like, we should make art about bananas and plants and, and then see if they want to talk about that. I'm bewildered and so over it. And I've decided I'm going to curate this collection. Like every piece of every movie and music and TV show review I watch now, I'm going to save in a folder, and I'll see how many I get in the next little bit that actually talk about a component of the art. Hear the word melody written in a music review, or like acting, or anyway.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap this one up. I think we did a good number on that. We'll see how it pans out in the post-production.
I think they're all insane.
And one final thing, if you enjoyed this episode, please spread the word and let your friends and family know about it. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button and notification bell. See you next time.